Hey everybody, Adam Volk here for the Social School. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are here to chat about search engine optimization, which is course number 2 if you are doing the digital marketing certificate. And so let's jump right into things and get into it. So this is our first module, and we're just going to take a little bit of a dive into what we're going to be chatting about as you work through these modules. So in this particular module, module number 1, we're just going to chat a little bit about what SEO is. We're going to figure out the definition. We'll talk a little bit about some of the features that you can see on the search engine result page. We're going to talk about some of the common myths. We're going to talk about paid search versus organic search, and we're going to discover the big 3 areas of SEO. So let's jump into that before we tackle any of the other modules. All right, so the first big question, you may have some familiarity with this topic already, but chances are you're wondering, what is SEO? It's definitely become a hot button topic within digital marketing these days. But it's also a technology and a field that has a lot of misconceptions about it. So really, what is SEO? In a nutshell, a good way to think about it is it's just about increasing the quantity and quality of traffic to your site from Google and other search engines. At the end of the day, that's really what you're trying to do with search engine optimization. It's just about driving that quantity and quality. But the ultimate goal is not to rank number 1. So you'll hear a lot of brands that they'll approach SEO specialists, or they will come at SEO from the approach of, hey, we want to appear in the first position on Google. That's all we care about. We just want to be number 1 on that first page. But that's not really a great approach. A better approach is really to generate leads and sales for your business. That should be the ultimate goal of SEO. Ranking is great. If we can rank on that first page, on that first position, that's amazing. But really, it's about helping our business. That is our main goal, and should be the main objective with any SEO program. Also, just as a caveat, if anybody comes to you who is an SEO specialist and says, hey, I'm going to guarantee to get you on that first page of Google, probably want to take that with a big grain of salt. We'll chat more about this in the course, but it's very difficult to rank for on that first page, especially if you're just starting out or in a very competitive field. So again, focus less on that rank and more about leads and sales. All right, so one way to think about search is just how pervasive it is with everything we do in our lives. And at the moment, there's been a number of different studies, but around 89% of all purchases start with a search. If you just think about your own recent purchase history, or if you ever had to make a large decision, or think about buying a home or a vehicle, or planning a vacation, or even making a smaller purchase online through Amazon or a retailer, chances are you started that purchase decision with a search. You want to see some reviews, you want to learn a little bit more about the product, you wanted to find some specific information around it. So search is just such a huge part of our everyday existence and something we're doing all the time. But SEO is also more than just Google and search engines. So that's kind of a change in the way the industry kind of functions at the moment. And it's really starting to become search everything optimization. And we're seeing a really radical shift in the way that SEO is being adopted as a technology and as a discipline. So SEOs, search engine optimization specialists, they're looking at optimizing for Google and search engines like Bing and Yahoo, and we'll talk about those. But they also are starting to optimize towards other things as well, like social media, video content on YouTube, Vimeo, and other sources. There's SEOs that are focused on Amazon as a primary e-com platform, and they're all optimizing towards Amazon search engine. There's app optimization in Google Play and the App Store for iOS users. And we're also seeing an increasing number of SEOs focusing on voice devices like Google Home, Siri, personal voice assistants, Alexa, all of those pervasive voice technologies that are really becoming widely adopted by consumers around the world. And there's people that have to optimize that kind of technology. And we're also seeing Google image optimization as its own discipline too, Believe it or not, 23% of all of the searches around the world are on the Google Images platform, which is a completely separate system in many ways from the primary Google system. So there's people who are really focused on optimizing for those images as more and more people are really turning to the image platform as a way to understand content and find information. So there's a whole range of disciplines that are around SEO, and it's not just search engines anymore. It's really a whole range of different devices and technology that we're seeing. But for the purposes of this course, we're going to be looking at traditional SEO. So we're really going to be focused on how to connect our website with search engines. That's going to be our primary objective of this. So we kind of got to learn to set up this foundational work and focus more on the traditional side before even beginning to consider some of those other things. So let's just talk a little bit about who the big players in the market are. Google, probably no surprise to you seeing something like this, but roughly 90% of all worldwide organic search traffic is driven by Google. So they're the largest player. And if you just think about how much trust we put into Google on a daily basis, we look to Google for medical advice. For things that could potentially be life-threatening to us, we turn to Google as a source of information. Not just about making purchase decisions, but just almost every daily aspect of our life. And we put an insane amount of trust into the system, probably more than we do government, sometimes even our own family members. So we're trusting that the information that Google's returning to us is accurate. So really incredible to see how important this technology is in our daily life, and just how focused Google has become on providing this type of information, and really just a huge part of people's everyday life. That being said, while Google controls roughly 90% of all searches, don't forget about Yahoo and Bing. So these are often kind of the ugly cousins of Google, but they still get a lot of search volume. So together, these two search engines drive about 8% of all organic search traffic. And then if we look at some other international search engines, in China we have Baidu, in Russia we have Yandex, and there's also the rise of a new search engine called DuckDuckGo, which is a very small, it's about 1% of all US and Canadian searches, but DuckDuckGo's platform is built on the idea that they're not collecting any personal data from you, which Google, Yahoo, and Bing obviously are. So that's kind of the players. We tend to focus just on Google, but there's definitely a range of different players when it comes to search engine optimization. All right, so the big question is, why bother with SEO? There's a ton of different tactics we can do to market our business, to get our name out there, to promote our brand. So this often comes up, why should I as a brand invest the time and energy and money into search engine optimization? And the best answer you can really give towards this, there's kind of three answers. The first is that it's usually, for most websites, the largest source of traffic. And most websites you'll see around 30 to 50, sometimes even higher than that, depending on the kinds of marketing programs they're running. But usually when it comes to organic search, that is the biggest driver of traffic to sites, by far and away the largest driver of traffic. So we're seeing more people who are doing Google searches or Bing or Yahoo searches and end up on your site. That's a huge source of traffic. And if you can tap into that and even make incremental changes that can boost the amount of people coming from search engines, that could potentially help your business a lot. The other really big benefit of organic search or working with SEO is that it tends to have higher conversion rates than other channels. And that's because we're targeting users who are actively looking for something. So somebody does a Google search, they're really interested in finding a particular product or service, and if I can connect with that individual, they're very likely to actually make a purchase or connect with me because I am providing what they're actually looking for. So that's a bit different than other channels like display or social media advertising, where a user is not necessarily seeking us out, but they have to see an ad and then are passively interacting with it. So it's much tougher to get up conversions off that. The other huge benefit is that it has one of the highest returns on investment out of any marketing channel. There's been a ton of studies around this, but basically when it comes to dollar for dollar, SEO tends to deliver one of the best returns for the amount of effort that you actually put into a program. It's right up there along with email as being actually also a very another really effective channel when it comes to ROI. But we definitely see with SEO that there is a huge opportunity and a huge return on investment if brands invest in this. And even a small company with limited budget, putting some dollars towards this particular technology and tactic can drive really, really great results. All right, so our next big question is, what is the SERP? So this might be a term that you're familiar with, but let's just talk a little bit more about it. This is also a term that's a hot button term that's used a lot with SEO, and this is kind of a foundational definition term that we really need to understand. So SERP simply stands for the search engine result page. That's the SERP. So a SERP is what the user sees after they conduct a search. It's made up of both organic and paid results, and there's a number of different elements that also can be fed into the SERP, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in this module. But on average, there's 10 results per SERP. So you'll see 10 different positions on this page. So if we did a search for oven here, we can see all the different positions. So the ranges, cooktops, and ovens, the Best Buy page, that's our position number 1 at the very, very top of that page. And this is really just what the actual kind of end result of what Google is serving to us. Also, though, we can kind of do a little bit more of an analysis and dig a little deeper and see what's actually showing up here. So we can see that the organic results, so this is where SEO comes into play. These are the results that are being served up there that Google has decided to organically serve to us. Images, as I mentioned, are also very, very important, both on the image search option within Google, but also Google's starting to show a lot more image results too. So we'll see that. We can also see here that this particular SERP is returning news results as well. And then on the right-hand side, we can see here these are paid results showing up. So this is from Google product ad here. That's on the paid search and paid product side and display side. So we can see that that's where that's coming from. And then you'll also see this sometimes show up on the right-hand side here. This is Google's knowledge graph. So Google looks at different sources and provides authoritative answers from its own existing database. So all of this is happening when we do a single search for something even as kind of simple as an oven. It's returning a ton of different information to us. The other thing you might see when you do a search, and you're probably seeing more and more of these appear in results when you do a search for almost anything, these are featured results. So these appear above other primary results on the page, and these are sometimes called position 0 by SEOs, just because it isn't necessarily within the primary results. So this will be usually a whole range of different things. In this case, we did a search for how do ovens work, and it returned this much longer, larger description at the top of the page that's explaining all that information for us. And this is because Google actually doesn't necessarily care if a user clicks through to a website. Google's only purpose is to serve up answers or to address a specific user question or query. And if they can do that on the SERP and without having to drive somebody to a website, they're going to do that. So we're seeing more and more of these position 0 or these featured results showing up in Google searches. And there is a ton of different featured results. This particular one is a instant answer, so it's going to give you a specific answer to a question that a user is searching for. But we'll also see featured results for images. There's videos now. You might even do a search for, as an example, a search how to change a bike tire, and a YouTube video will show, and it'll be actually loaded at the exact part of the video where it instructs you on how to do that. So more and more we're seeing that as well. You might see tables, you might see lists, you might see a carousel featuring multiple images. There's a ton of these different featured results, and Google is spending more and more effort and time into having these appear in the SERP. The other thing you might see is a Google Map results. These are sometimes referred to as the Google 3-pack because on the SERP it's showing you three specific map locations. So each of these locations being shown here is coming from organic. This is an organic search. Nobody paid to have these map locations here. But Google is actually pulling this from its own platform called Google My Business. And I would highly encourage you, if you haven't already, to take ownership of your Google My Business page. It's essentially a yellow pages that Google kind of pulls in to create an understanding of locations and information. And if you don't have ownership of your Google My Business listing, Google will attempt to create that for you by looking at your website or other sources. So it's going to decide what it thinks are your hours of operation, your phone number, all those kinds of things, the images that want to be associated. So by taking ownership of your Google My Business page, you can have control over what's actually being shown here, and you can choose images, the hours of operation, your phone number, and just make sure that this is accurate. I can even do a bit of optimization towards your Google My Business listing. So I would definitely recommend doing that as well if you have the opportunity. All right. So one thing that's really, really important to bear in mind when we look at the SERP is that, as we chatted about, there's 10 results for each SERP. So each results page that we see has 10 results. But what we actually see with Google is, we know that, and you probably know this from your own experience, it's very rare when you search for something that you end up on the second page or third page. Those are basically, kind of the graveyard of Google. Very few users ever make it to the second page, and even less make it to the third page and beyond. So really this first page is where everyone's fighting for. Second page sure gets a bit of love. Maybe people will head over to that page. But this first page is where everyone's trying to kind of compete against each other to get results for. But not only that, we actually see when we break out these positions that the first position, so what's actually appearing at the very, very top, the first result we see, that gets almost all of the search love, almost all of the attention when it comes to users. The click-through rate on the first position is 33%. So that means out of 100 searches, if this same result's showing up every time, 33 people are going to click on that result. So obviously having control over that first position can be hugely beneficial. And then we see it kind of drop off as we go further down the page. Second result, much lower. Third position has a 9% click-through rate. Fourth position, 7th. Fifth position, 5th. And by the time you get to the very bottom of the page, it's a much lower click-through rate. But here's the kind of weird caveat about that. In some cases, you can actually have higher conversion rates being lower down at the page. And that's just because of the fact that if a user's actually scrolling all the way down the page and then clicks on your result, chances are they've read all these results and then are like, oh, yours is amazing, and they're going to click off on that result, and they're more likely to convert that way. So just kind of a weird kind of exception that proves the rule when it comes to conversion rates around this. But in general, what we see here is this first position just soaks up all of the clicks, and so that's really where people are trying to get to, and why we really are focused on that first page and those first kind of 3 results. But again, our goal isn't just to rank here. Our goal is to drive conversions. If we have a ton of clicks coming through but nobody's buying our product, that's not great. That's not a great experience. So just bear that in mind when we do consider these results. All right, so just to make things extra fun and complicated, Google actually breaks its results into 2 different options. There is a desktop SERP and a mobile SERP. So the mobile SERP is pretty much almost identical to your desktop results, or the way it's actually structured. It also has 10 positions on the SERP when you're on a mobile device, but it may display less information to fit your screen, so it might shorten a page title or potentially a little description of what the page is about. We'll talk about those things in this course. But it might just show a little bit less information just to try to make it fit on the screen. And also, click-through rates for those first 3 positions, while we know they're really, really high when it comes to desktop, that the first position gets 33% of all clicks, it's even actually higher when it comes to mobile. And that's because it's just taking up, that first position is going to take up half your screen size when you see it. So users tend to click on those even more, which makes it even more competitive from a mobile standpoint. And so when we look at our results, we actually break out for the keywords that we're ranking for, and we'll talk more about that as we get a little deeper into the other modules. We really break out our results between desktop and mobile. So you can rank for some keywords on desktop, and you can rank for completely different ones on mobile. So that makes it very, very challenging and kind of adds, we're almost optimizing for two completely different systems within Google, which also makes SEO a bit challenging. So just as a caveat too, on the mobile side, mobile is actually more important than ever before, and it should be the one thing you focus on. That's because Google has found that more and more users are using mobile to interact with websites. So at the moment, they're finding in general, there's probably about 60% of all users are interacting with the internet in general from a mobile device. And if you just think about your own experiences, yeah, you're probably using a computer at work, maybe at home, but think about how much time we spend on mobile. Everyone has their phone in their hand. Everyone's using mobile to interact with apps, content, videos, Netflix, websites, even beyond just thinking of search. So mobile is such an important part of the overall user experience these days. And from a Google standpoint, what actually happened in March of 2018 is that Google rolled out something called mobile first indexing. So what that means simply is that Google now crawls and indexes the mobile version of a site, and they look at that as the primary source of content and the primary source for determining rank. So even though they'll say, hey, yeah, it's important to have a great desktop experience, we're only going to look at your site from a mobile standpoint to determine rankings, regardless of if a user's searching on desktop or if they're searching on mobile. Just because they know that mobile is more important than desktop, so that's why they want to focus on the mobile version of your site. Before this happened, Google did look at the overall mobile experience, but that was just a factor that they considered. They still would index sites and actually crawl the site and try to look at your site from a desktop standpoint. That doesn't happen anymore. So that just means it's more important than ever that your website is mobile friendly. It offers a great mobile experience. That's not only going to help users and help with conversion rates and all those good things that you want from a usability standpoint, but it's also going to help with SEO. So focus and design your website and focus on your user experience from a mobile standpoint, and that's going to be a big first step that you can take from an SEO standpoint. All right, so next, how does Google decide what to show on the SERP? So we know what the SERP is. It's the search engine results page. We've kind of seen how it's broken out into featured results, how we see organic, how we'll see paid results, we see maps, we see videos, potentially images, all this cool stuff. But how does Google decide what it's actually going to show us on the SERP? So the first thing that Google really uses to understand what the user's query is and what to show is the Google algorithm. So this is a very closely guarded secret. It is constantly evolving, and it has changed exponentially since this was first created over a decade ago. It's actually updated about 500 to 1,000 times a year, which is pretty insane when you think about it. And big updates are given names. Google will give, they started giving them a lot of bird names, so hummingbird, panda, penguin, pigeon. Google will actually say, hey, this is such a major update. This only occurs once a year, once every couple of years, but they'll say this is a big update, and they'll give it a name and a brief explanation of what it was. They sort of will have stepped back a little bit from the kind of cutesy naming conventions. The biggest one that actually recently happened was in March 2019, they rolled out what they called their March 2019 Core Update. So a little less punchy than Hummingbird or Panda or some of the other names. But they just wanted to kind of address those user concerns and just making it clear that there's a really big update that occurred. And so SEOs are constantly monitoring these changes to the algorithm and then trying to figure out what Google has done. But nobody really knows. Google's not going to go out of their way to tell anyone what they've done. This is a very closely guarded secret. And Google will kind of say, hey, we made some changes to improve user experience, and but they don't really ever say too much about what they've actually done. What we do know from the algorithm standpoint, and there's been a lot of kind of sleuth work that's been done. Some SEO specialists and other digital marketing specialists have looked at things like Google's patents or chatted with Google employees to try to get a better sense, just so they can kind of understand things a little bit better, but still very hard to understand exactly what's happening with the algorithm. But we do know that they have about 200 different ranking factors that all play a part in working together to understand and serve up content within the SERP. And increasingly, Google is leaning on something known as RankBrain, which is their artificial intelligence and machine learning system within Google that's designed to mimic basically human thought processes. And Google's investment in AI is huge these days. As an example, Google actually got RankBrain to compete against a team of Google engineers and deliver search results. So these are people who work at Google who understand the platform better than anybody else, and they went toe-to-toe with this to try to match up results that they thought were relevant to a particular search. And then they took the two comparisons and asked actual human beings to say, hey, which do you actually think is relevant? The RankBrain system beat out the humans 80% of the time. So it's thinking like a person, but also more accurate than an actual human being. So very cool and a little bit scary to think that AI is going to change so much and become such a huge part of our daily lives. And at the moment, about 50% of all Google searches are processed by RankBrain. And so we're seeing AI become a huge part of Google's platform, and something they're investing millions, if not billions of dollars into evolving. So then how does search work? So we have this algorithm. It looks at 200 different factors. It's updated sometimes 1,000 times a year. So how does the actual system work once we have that algorithm in the background? So the way the system works is that content is gathered by things called web crawlers, and these are sometimes called spiders. So web crawlers are really just basic programs that visit, or also known as crawling, a web page. So that's where the term World Wide Web comes from. It comes from this term back in the 90s about using these web crawlers to understand your site. So when a spider visits a page, what it does is it makes a copy of that page, and then it adds the URL of that page to a kind of master index that Google has. And then it's going to follow all the links on that page and copy and index everything that it finds before moving on to additional links. And then what it does is it takes all of this information, so making copies of this page, following links, and it takes it to Google, and it has this massive index of different sites that Google uses. So it's almost like these spiders return to Google, and it's like a big book of what the internet is composed of. And then Google uses this to sort of understand how all the World Wide Web is connected by these spiders. But a really interesting thing and way to think about Google is that, yes, it's very complicated. Yes, it's 200 different factors that are ranking. Yes, it's using artificial intelligence. But if you get nothing else from this course, this is a very, very important point that I want you to remember. Just remember that Google is nothing more than a series of links. That's what the search results are. What you're seeing is nothing but links. That's how Google understands things. It just understands content by following links, both within your own internal site and within other sites that are linking off to yours. That's all Google really is, which is kind of weird when you think about it. But really, it's just about following these links. It is truly a web of connected links. And if you kind of think of Google from that standpoint, as we'll see a little bit later, it really does make your life a little bit easier. And it's actually not as complicated as it sounds to do some of this optimization work. If we always just bear in mind that the Google, and the internet for that matter, is really just nothing more than a series of links. So, when Google crawls a page, so when those spiders or web crawlers actually crawl a page, they're looking at a bunch of different factors. So we talked about some of those 200 plus different factors. But again, just following those links along, spiders are going to look at a number of things. So they're going to look at things like the quality of your content. So RankBrain will even look at things like passion. They actually have psychographic data that says, hey, is somebody actually writing about this topic who's super interested in it? Are they really passionate about this topic? So it'll look at that as a factor. It's going to look and see how old this is. Is this a new piece of content? Is this an older piece of content? Newer content tends to rank better. So it'll look at that and just see, hey, is this something that is still relevant? It's going to look at specific keywords on the page. So that's still really important, and we'll talk about that in one of the later modules in this course. And it's going to look at things like how quickly the page loads. So site speed has become a really critical ranking factor. So the faster your site loads, the better. In fact, Google's done a number of different studies, and they found that 53% of users will bounce from a site, from a page, if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. So the old dial-up days where we'd wait for AOL to load and it'd take a minute. Now users are super impatient, and if it takes more than 3 seconds, we are out of there. We're not going to hang around and wait for it to load. So that's also a ranking factor for when it comes to Google. And then it's going to look at code and other technical elements, which we're going to talk a little bit about in this course. And then it's also going to look at how many sites link to yours. We're also going to talk about that in this course too. So that's really saying, if we have a lot of different sites that are linking off to yours, Google's going to say, hey, this must be really popular. All these sites are linking to this particular page. And that really just helps reinforce the authority on a particular subject or industry that you might have. So this is just a few of the many factors, but some of the most important ones that Google's looking at once spiders follow all the links and are able to access your particular website. All right. Next, just wanted to chat a little bit about some of the common SEO myths and some of the big challenges that come with actually trying to implement an SEO program. So here's kind of the 4 big myths. The first is that all Google results are the same. That is absolutely not true. Results are actually customized for location. So if I'm searching in Calgary versus Vancouver, I'm going to see completely different results. If I search for cowboy hats in Calgary versus cowboy hats in Montreal, I am going to get very, very different results. So Google is able to identify your IP address and location, and it's going to serve up results that are relevant to your specific location. So the country you're in, the city you're in. It might even be more localized than city. Could even be around the community around you too. So very important to think of geography. And local SEO is very, very important. More and more people are searching for things around them. Google is also going to serve up results that are specifically tailored to you. So this is a huge misconception that people have when it comes to Google. So about 50% of all search results are personalized. So that means in general, the SERP is probably, if we do 2 searches for the same thing, it's probably going to show us the same results. But it might not. What I see isn't necessarily going to be the same thing that you see if we search for the exact same thing. That's because if I'm logged into a Google property or like Gmail or even logged into any kind of third-party tool or data that Google has access to, which is a lot of different partners and parties, Google's going to be able to understand what I'm interested in, and it wants to serve up results that are specific to me. So very important to consider that results are going to be based on location and user data. The other common myth is that you can buy rank. So this used to be an old school and very sketchy technique that people did, but outside of running paid search, you can't buy links. Google's actively going to penalize you for buying links or doing other sketchy black hat practices. That even goes so far as to say, hey, I will give you $20 if you link to my site. That's actually a violation of Google's official policy, and they could penalize your site for that and even blacklist you from ranking. So no money is supposed to change hands when SEO is involved, at least as far as Google is concerned from a linking standpoint. Obviously, you're going to pay an SEO person potentially to run a program for you, but Google is saying that you should never pay anyone any money to impact organic rankings at all. So very important to consider that. The other really big myth is that Google is going to crawl all the pages on my website. That is also absolutely not true. In fact, Google has something called a crawl budget, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. And that means Google's only going to crawl a certain number of resources, or a certain number of pages. It's only going to spend a finite amount of time and effort and energy into crawling a website, which can actually be really problematic if it's a website that has tens of thousands, or in bigger cases like Amazon or Kijiji and big sites like that, millions of pages. But even small sites, Google might not necessarily crawl all of your pages. It's going to use only a set crawl budget that it decides to what that's going to be, and it might not crawl every page. So we want to make it easy for Google to crawl our site and kind of get the most bang from that crawl budget. The other common myth is that Google is an all-powerful AI. It sees and knows everything we do and knows everything about us. It's incredible. It's like a god of the internet. That is also not true. So the other big takeaway from this, and you'll probably hear me bring this up a lot when we go through this course, is that a better way to think of Google is like an idiot savant. It is incredibly powerful. It can calculate billions of data points per second. It can understand contextual relevance. It can do all this crazy stuff. But it's also very dumb. It's like a socially awkward genius. So it can understand all this data, but it responds well to super simple instructions. And Google's also a little lazy too. So just bear that in mind. If you can help Google, because it's very kind of takes things literally, it responds best to simple instructions, it responds best to simple commands. If you can kind of approach your SEO from that standpoint, it really does help with rankings too. So Google isn't this all-powerful thing that does and knows everything. It is an idiot savant, and if we kind of approach it from that, it definitely will make things easier for you. All right, so just wanted to mention some of the big challenges with SEO. There's a whole bunch of different challenges that are you're going to come across as you kind of delve deeper into this subject. But some of the biggest challenges. It takes years, if not months, sorry, I should say the other way around. It takes months, if not years, to see results when it comes to SEO. In fact, Google's done a bunch of videos where they will address questions that users have about SEO, and they've said, if you're a new website, nobody really knows who you are, you just launched, it could take you about 12 months before you start to see any significant ranking improvements or end up on the first page of Google. So very, very slow moving, which is why a lot of brands will invest in SEO and then they don't see results overnight, so they say, hey, forget it. So can be very slow going. The other challenge is that it's very hard to measure return on investment from this particular technology. So a lot of times brands or clients will say, hey, I'm going to give you a bunch of money, and then you say you're going to do some optimization works. How many keywords am I going to get to rank for? How much extra traffic am I going to get to rank for? And even doing complicated predictive modeling and all sorts of different, number crunching that you can get analytics and marketing science people to do these days, even doing all those kinds of advanced things, it's still super, super hard to say for sure that if you give me a bunch of money for SEO and I increase your rankings, it's going to lead to this many more conversions or this many rankings. And it sounds almost like a cop-out, but that's just because we know there's so many different factors at play. There's algorithm changes that occur 1,000 times a year. There's competition, there's seasonality, there's just so many different things at play. So it's very hard to say for sure that if we do something, it's going to lead to, X, we do X optimization, it's going to lead to Y results. Very hard to say that. The other challenge is that it often requires working with developers and other team members for that matter, creative, copy, content, designers, to actually implement this, and UX as well, even working with them. And that's challenging for SEOs because developers have other priorities often. They're concerned about making sure the site structure and functionality works okay, and SEO can sometimes get put on the back burner for them. So it's kind of a struggle to get them to implement some of these things. And most SEOs are not coders or don't have that coding knowledge. So that can be a real challenge. The other big challenge is that SEO is driven, and we'll chat about this in this course, is driven almost primarily by content. So if you have content that's terribly written, boring, not helpful, uninteresting, no matter what you do from a technical SEO standpoint, it's going to be very unlikely that you could ever get that to rank. So at the end of the day, you can kind of do all the optimization work that we talk about in this course, and if you don't have great content, it's gonna probably not get the best results. So content is so important for SEO, and that means, getting somebody to produce great content can be very challenging. All right, one other thing just wanted to chat about really quickly is the difference between search engine optimization, SEO, and search engine marketing, SEM. A lot of people are constantly confused by these terms, and they use them interchangeably, and they say one thing, but they're actually meaning the other thing. So let's just clear this up right now. So SEO is unpaid. It's also sometimes referred to as organic search or natural search. SEM, on the other hand, is paid. We are paying for these. We are running ads. This is sometimes known as pay-per-click or PPC advertising. So those are the two differences between SEO and SEM when it comes to paid versus unpaid. The other big difference is that SEO makes up about 40% of Google searches that result in a click. So that's interesting to note, is that 56% of searches that occur on Google have no clicks. So you'll remember we talked a little bit earlier about those featured results, those position 0. So that's just Google providing information to a user, and they say, oh, awesome, that's cool. I didn't need to click anywhere. You gave me the answer, Google. Great. So just bear that in mind. But when it comes to SEO, it's still a huge percentage. So 40% of Google searches are going to get an SEO click from them. That's a big change over SEM, which is about 4% of all searches on Google result in a click for a paid search ad. So that being said, well, there is definitely way more organic clicks coming through on Google. Paid can have really strong results as far as conversions go, and you can rank for keywords that you would never be able to appear for organically, really competitive terms that would take you years to rank for with SEO. You can buy those, so that's kind of the primary advantage of why you would run SEM. There's also been a lot of studies that have found that the two working together, so that you're kind of dominating the SERP with your organic listings, and you're dominating the SERP with the same SERP with your paid, those tend to have higher click-through rates in general, just because users are going to see you as being a very authoritative source on a particular topic or around your brand. So just something to bear in mind. The other kind of key difference is that when someone does a search from an SEO standpoint, the page is going to meet the user query. So the SERP is going to show up to something that Google decides is relevant. That's also true when it comes to paid search. So if I'm searching shoes, leather shoes for men, and Google's going to say, hey, yes, this is the best result. So Google has to say, yes, this is relevant, but it's also going to take into consideration how much the advertiser is willing to bid on that particular keyword. But at the end of the day, relevance is always going to trump bid. Otherwise, big brands like Coke or Nike, if you did a search for, a goldfish, you're going to see a Nike ad. So that's not relevant to, Nike shoes are not relevant to goldfish. So you can't just buy your way onto the SERP. You still have to be relevant when Google considers your bid. But at the end of the day, SEO, Google's just deciding, yes, this is relevant. And paid search, they're saying, yes, this is relevant, and I'm going to serve up this one because they potentially might be willing to pay a little bit more. The other difference from an SEO standpoint is that when the results that are shown, the information for a particular page, Google decides what to show. We can help that a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit more about the components that Google looks for, like page title and meta description. But Google still, at the end of the day, it decides what to show for your page. That's different from the SEM side of things. From paid search, the advertiser provides Google with ad copy to show in the SERP. So we are telling Google, in that case, here's exactly what I want you to show for my ad. So that's really the two differences, but very important to kind of break these out. And SEOs and SEMs tend to be completely different disciplines. They will sometimes be overlap, but there's very few people who are good at both and are actually running running these types of programs concurrently. So just important to bear that in mind. All right. Next, just want to talk about what I call the big three of SEO. So what do I mean by that? Well, we know that there are over 200 ranking factors. And sure, we could go through that 200 plus list and try to figure out what can we tackle. But a better approach is to really focus our efforts on three categories. And we are going to break out these categories in future modules and delve a little deeper into them. But the really big three, and also I should preface this by saying, this is my own personal big three of SEO and what from doing this for a number of years, how I've broken out SEO efforts. This isn't a industry, there's no industry best practice that's saying, hey, do the big three of SEO. This is just my own approach to it. But I break it out into three different categories. The first is crawlability, then the second is content and keywords, and the third is backlinks. And I've also, you'll notice, put this in the order of priority. So crawlability being the first thing we need to do, then we focus on content and keywords, and then we should focus on our backlinks. So we'll talk a little bit more about these, but these are really the big three, and we're going to delve a little deeper into these in the course. But just as kind of a highlight of what we'll be chatting more about, crawlability is the technical elements and internal links. Remember, Google is nothing but a series of links. That's how it figures out what to show. So it's both internal links and also external links. But crawlability is just making it easy as possible for search engines like Google and also Yahoo and Bing and other search engines to crawl and index our website. So that's what we want to do. We want to make it easy for Google to do that. If we can have all the most awesome content and it's amazing, and we've done this great job producing this material that's so helpful to users, our users are going to eat it up. But if they can't, Google can't crawl that content, it's useless. No one will ever find it. So we want to make sure that it's crawlable. That's the first foundational step we need to take. Then content and keywords. This is what most people think of when they think of SEO, about keywords and grabbing those keywords and adding them strategically to the page. And yes, we'll definitely talk about that. It's very, very important. We'll also talk about the quality and quantity of content around a topic too, because that's very important. Google doesn't just look at a single page in isolation. It actually looks at your site from a number of different pages, and it's going to say, hey, they've got 6 articles around this topic. This looks like a very authoritative site around a specific topic or industry. So let's serve up that site in results. And then we're going to talk about backlinks. One way to think of backlinks, and we'll chat more about how to go about getting them and why they're important, but really they're almost like a vote or popularity contest to your site. So about 70% or more of a page's SEO value comes from links from other sites. So this is hugely important to get people to link to your sites. But it's not just how many you have, it's the quality of those backlinks as well. So the more relevant, high quality sites that link to yours, the better off you're going to be. And we're going to chat about a little bit more about what each of these three does as we progress through this course. All right, so let's take a break here, and that wraps up Module 1. Let's take some time here and complete this exercise. So you'll find this in your workbook. So let's do through exercise 1. We're just going to do a really quick and dirty industry and competitor audit. So what I would like you to do is to conduct an incognito Google search. And if you don't know how to do that, I've included here a little instructions on using Google Incognito mode. So this is an option available in Chrome. What you're going to do is you're going to click File, while you're in Chrome, File, New Incognito window, and it's going to open a window that's going to look like this. You'll see here it says you can now browse privately, and other people who use this device won't see your activity. And so basically it's stripping personal data from you. Because remember, 50% of all of your searches, of all Google searches, are personalized for you. So we don't want to see that. Google's still going to know where you're located in the world. It's going to be able to identify your IP address that way, but it's going to strip out any personalization. So whenever we do searches for anything, we want to bear this in mind, and we want to go use incognito mode just so that we're getting as general results as possible and we aren't getting those personalized results. So what we're going to do is, after conducting an incognito web search, we're going to look for relevant search terms for your industry. So don't enter your brand, because your brand's going to be very easy to rank for, but think about non-branded keywords that users would search for your industry. And then what are the top three results for that? So you could start with a single search term here and just put in what you think is most important to your industry. But just enter that and then note what's actually showing up. Then look for your competitor. And then are you ranking above or below them in the results page? Remember, ranking's not everything, but we also at the same time know that rank is driving a lot of clicks and traffic. Next, look for your business by name and see what are the first 3 pages that show up. Does somebody actually rank above you for your name? Do you rank lower down at the page? Is there other brands that are showing up that are local or around the world? What's actually appearing when you're doing a search for your brand name? And think really, really hard about what the main pages you want users to see when they search for your business or brand. Is it your home page? Is there a particular product or service page? What are those 3 pages that if you were going to optimize your website that you would focus on as being the most important to your business? So let's just take a few minutes to do this now and work through this exercise, and then I will see you back here for module number 2.